So my PhD is called Products as Enablers for Pro-Environmental Behavior, an investigation of reusable alternatives for single-use products. Right now, I'm 1.5 years into my PhD. My promoters are Professor Dr. Els Dubois and Professor Dr. Ingrid Mons. And at the department or the research group of product development, we have an eco-design team under supervision of Els Dubois. And we consist of several researchers and PhD students that investigate different phases of the product life cycle. So a colleague of mine is focusing on material identity, another one is focusing on disposal of products, and my research is about elongating product usage through a sustainable experience, which is actually another way to approach the plastic resource questions. So in general, the problem that I started from is overconsumption of single-use products, which leads to plastic pollution on the one hand and resource depletion on the other hand. And my solution is focusing on reduce or reuse of products instead of disposing plastic products. So if we look at the title, the reusable alternatives require some longer-term behavior change or habit change, because we want to transition from using disposable products to reusable products, and you have to repeatedly use those products for them to be efficient or even more environmentally friendly than their disposal counterparts. So it requires some behavior change. And we need an alternative for these single-use products because, as I said before, it causes pollution and resource depletion. So these alternatives for single-use products in general can be divided into several sort of products. So I'm focusing on the reusable products, but another option is to focus on material efficiency of, for example, packaging, or focusing on the disposal part. So when you talk about recycling materials. But my PhD is about reusables, and then we can even divide it further into ownership versus shared ownership or no ownership. The first 1.5 years that already passed, I focused on ownership, which means that people buy reusable products and they repeatedly use those same products themselves in an individual level. Shared ownership is when you buy something together with other people and you use it, you all use it. For example, car sharing. If you buy a car and you share it with other people. And no ownership is something that we call single use per reuse. It's something that we do, for example, when we return glass bottles, or if we use the sharing system of the Velos in Antwerp, where you each time use another bicycle. It's not always the same one, and that's what we mean with single use per reuse. These are examples of products that you typically buy with ownership. That's a good thing for a few products. For example, the menstrual cup is something that you want to use on an individual level, which is good. And also, like drinking bottles or lunch boxes, it's logical that you just reuse your own products. And this is also the type of product that I already did a lot of research in. But then the other types, like with shared ownerships, product service systems, sharing systems, are really interesting to look into further because they create new ways of consuming, which is really interesting if we want to really have some impact with these reusable products. So the big challenges with alternatives for single-use products is getting people to change their behavior, because reusable products in comparison with disposable products often have a higher production cost. So you have to reuse this reusable product a lot of times before it's even as sustainable as the disposable items. So an example is a metal straw, which you have to reuse up to like 150 times before it's better than each time using a new plastic straw. And the same goes for cotton bags and paper bags. It has a larger impact during production, so you have to reuse them a few times before they are better for the environment. And this long-term behavior change is something we really have to stimulate with consumers. Because what we are seeing is that a lot of people are having good intentions. There are more and more shops that sell these alternative products, and they're getting more trendy. And a lot of people are caring about the environment more and more, but they're not really changing their behavior and can have a lot of reasons. And this is what we call the intention behavior gap, and is a big thing that I'm trying to figure out in my research. So these are my research questions. The general question is, how can these alternatives for single-use products be designed to ensure continued long-term use? And this question is divided into three sub-research questions. And the first one is, what variables determine the key barriers and enablers for people to accept and correctly use and keep on using single-use product alternatives? So what are all these things that influence people's behavior, and what can we how can we, the later question is, how can we influence this? The second research question is, what is the relation between required behavior change, or the size or the difficulty in changing your behavior, and the environmental impact of an alternative and the type of user that uses this alternative? So I want to make connections between different types of users, different types of consumers, of how people live, and the connection between that and how much they perceive the behavior change that's needed, and how big the impact of that particular alternative is. Because if you have a very small or little impact that something can have, but it requires so much behavior change that then it's not really interesting to try to pursue, because it requires a lot of effort and it doesn't have a lot of results. So I think that's a really interesting approach to take. And to then come to the last research question, which is, how can we support designers in changing user behavior and habits regarding alternatives for single-use plastics? So to put all this information into practice, how can we design these products, and in particular these services or product service systems better, using all this information that we gathered. So this behavior change, or these variables that influence behavior change, can also be divided into two main parts. And the first one is the individual part, the part of the consumer, which is about their attitude, their personal norms, their intentions, the social norms that influence their intentions or attitudes, their habits. So it's really on a personal level, and it's also the part that I investigated most now, starting from several models from social psychology, for example, to really get to know what are all these variables and how much influence has each variable on other variables, etc. But on the other hand, there's the context parts, and it's really important. It's about societal values, about cultures, about regulations, the infrastructure that's there, social practices. So it's the environment of the consumer that also influences his or her behavior. And this is something that lately I figured out more and more that this is a very important part also. So this will also be included in the next steps I will take. So in general, what kind of methods I've already used in my first part of my research is focus groups. It was really explorative. The first research activity that I did was the focus groups, to explore the barriers that people encounter when they are using these alternatives, or the barriers that they have that prevent them from purchasing those types of products, and also the reasons why they stopped using products that they already bought. And this is has already been published and presented at Plate's conference in May. And the main findings were that big thresholds for a change of environment. It was research done with students that just lived on their own, not that long, so with change of environment is a big influence, but also the cost of these products, their personal preference, convenience, and also safety and hygiene that are the biggest findings of these focus groups. Next to this, I did some surveys, one in 2019 and one now in 2021. The first one was only with Flemish respondents. The second ones were 3 surveys actually done in Russia, USA, and Belgium. I more or less used the same questionnaire, so we could also compare the answers of people before and after COVID-19 pandemic, because it's more and more it proves to be an interesting thing to research, especially when you're thinking about the safety and hygiene perception that people have with pre-packaged disposable products. I did a survey also with 3 countries to do some cross-cultural research to see if there's differences between different cultures. And it was also to really investigate in depth the variables that influence behavior and habits. And I did the same in some semi-structured interviews also to look into these variables and discuss the before and after COVID-19 perception of people, and also do some more exploration. And I'm still analyzing the data from the survey in the semi-structured interviews. So what I've already done in my PhD is a literature study. I collected a lot of data and I did the analysis of the focus groups, and I'm busy on analyzing the surveys. What I still have to do or planning to do is some design practice investigation, look into existing solutions, do some case selection, select a few interesting cases to do more in-depth research with, for example, diary studies. Eventually, I might do some expert interviews with people that are like with entrepreneurs, for example, and I still have to do some data analysis. And then after that, I still have to develop my last work package, which would be the development of some kind of design toolkit, so fellow designers can actually use what we found in this research project